Welcome to Things You Don't Know, the podcast that seeks to share information that is largely unknown about important events or important people. Today, this is really exciting. There is a woman, an African American woman, who was a great inventor, but not only that, she had the heart and the tenacity to make things work. Her name
was Elizabeth Blount, and she was born November 24th, 1914, in Hickory, Virginia, what's now Chesapeake in the Tidewater.
So what do I need to know about her? Give me some quick cliff notes. Why is she so important?
Well, she's one of the pioneers of the rehabilitation movement for people with disabilities. Her mother had the same name, Elizabeth Blount. Her father, named George Woodward, may have actually been a career criminal. And during her childhood, something happened that will impact her much later. She received corporal punishment for writing with her left hand.
Oh, yes, that's a crime against humanity for sure.
I mean, that is pretty harsh to discriminate against, your own child for using the quote wrong hand.
I think it was the school who actually punished her for that. And at that time in America, corporal punishment was the order of the day for schools. And the other thing, John, that you were asking, what was she so famous for? Why are we interested? Well, yeah, she was a pioneer in the physical therapy movement. She invented multiple rehab devices, and she did something else with handwriting. She was a kid, right? And she's messing around, and she decides, well, let me see if I can write with my left hand. Let me see if I can write with my feet. With my feet? Oh my God. Okay, so she does that. She learns how to do this stuff. Amazing. Amazing.
So she dropped out of school in the sixth grade and moved to New Jersey and began educating herself through a self-directed course. She earned a GED and then entered the Panzer College of Hygiene and Physical Education, which is now called Montclair University.
College, yeah.
Graduating third in the nursing class of 1936.
What kind of nurse was she? LPN, RN?
She was an RN.
Okay.
But she decided she wanted to expand her healing abilities and became a physical therapist 3 years later. Now, she was mentored by a very famous woman who was also a therapist, Edna Mahoney. Now, Dr. Mahoney was the director of Franklin Roosevelt's rehab clinic in Warm Springs, Georgia. If any of you want to learn more about the Roosevelt family, check out our Eleanor Roosevelt podcast. You'll get a lot out of that.
And I understand that she also studied things like water therapy and traditional Chinese medicine. So she was very eclectic in what she decided to look at.
Absolutely, very and quite progressive for that era. She entered Kennedy Community Hospital, which was the only entirely staffed and supported African-American hospital in New Jersey. And later on, she worked at a very famous rehab center called the Bronx Hospital, where she studied connective tissue massage under a great masseuse and MD by the name of James Wetzel, who created the idea of using massage for rehab.
I wonder if that's related to practice of Rolfing. I know we don't really know, but, I want to interrupt your flow for just a tiny second, because I just got to tell our listeners that getting the information about this woman was difficult. It's scattered. People don't apparently give her the credit of doing proper research on her. And I am proud of my team who actually said, that's not right. We're going to do what we need to do.
It took some doing, but we did it.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Sean.
Well, getting back to Ms. Blount for a moment here, Wetzel regarded the therapist-client bond as spiritually sacred. So he taught what would now be called patient-directed care. And Miss Blount took that religiously to heart, repeatedly telling her clients after World War II, many of whom were amputees, you are not crippled in your mind. A total reaction against the pity, infantilization idea of that time. And this is where one of her childhood skills came into great use. She began to teach returning veterans who were amputees or paralyzed how to write either with their remaining hand or with their feet if they didn't have one. So this is a childhood skill that transposes itself into the rehab of others as an adult.
That's fascinating, though, when you say that she took a childhood thing that she did and used it in her work in such a fantastic way. So she goes to the Bronx and uses this, and she was instrumental in promulgating the patient-centered or patient-directed care. Those are really important things. Those things are used today, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. Not just in the rehab field either. I mean, patient-directed care it's created such a thing that touches on every aspect of healthcare.
Indeed. Now, Sean, I think she married some guy, Thomas Griffin, in 1951.
Yes, that's the same year she got her first and most famous patent. She turned her hand to inventing in the late 40s, and she had conversations with her veteran patients and basically asked them what was the hardest thing about being an amputee or being paralyzed. And they said they felt embarrassed about having to be fed. So
don't blame them. I don't blame them. Do you?
She developed this device called a portico receptacle support, which allowed a person to control the amount of food by a bite mechanism inside their mouth, which restored pleasure and autonomy to eating.
I'm actually curious about this. I mean, a lot of people with, especially paralysis, but also people with, nerve damage and stuff, they might have a hard time biting. I understand this device used only 10% of strength or something like that?
Yes, you're quite right. Anyone who could maneuver their jaw and teeth at all could use it. And later on, she developed the plastic Emeses basin to get rid of fluids both in and out of the operating room. Here's a fascinating story, folks. She couldn't find anyone to make this device. So she created a plastic mold by herself, took it home.
Yeah, she did that. She did that with rags, paper, sort of like making a paper mache mold that she did by her hand. Really interesting. Go ahead, Sean.
And then she took it home and baked it in her own oven.
Lucky she didn't set herself on fire, but yeah, go ahead.
Now, the next year in 52, she developed a head supporting device which stabilized people with quadriplegia so they could type. In an era without computers, it made communication a heck of a lot easier.
Indeed. I want to go back to the Emeses basin. Those that design and made of plastic is used today. And if you go into the hospital, you will find on the stand next to your bed an Emeses basin. Okay, now, what is it for? Well, if you feel like you're going to throw up or something, that's what it's for. So it's not just any fluids that we're talking about here. An Emeses basin is a standard thing in hospitals today. And she didn't get anything from that. I don't believe. As far as we could find, she didn't get any big monies for that.
No, she had a habit of giving away the rights to use equipment, or sometimes the equipment itself. Here is a very sad story. She had offered to the Veterans Administration and to our own government the feeding and the head support devices either for free or at cost. They refused it, probably because of her being of African descent and female in the 1950s.
Which is such a travesty to have to acknowledge and see that this happened and still happens today so frequently.
And I got to say, and I'm going to try and be nice. No, screw it. It pisses me off. We're losing because we decide that we can't listen to other people that don't look like us or don't speak the same way or whatever. And we miss out on their ideas, their thought, their energy, their giving, their goodness. And it's wrong.
I couldn't agree more, Dr. Weir.
So anyhow, she goes, Belgium.
But to her credit, she didn't give up. She went to Belgium and she was decorated with the Royal Order of the Lion. That's the Belgian equivalent of a Medal of Honor by King Baudouin I himself, and then went to France. And
well, I understand the King Baudouin actually personally bought that head support device, right?
Yes, his younger brother had been lost both hands in World War II as part of the Belgian resistance. So he wanted to give his brother his dignity back. And then she went to France and spent 3 days in the company of Prime Minister Edgar Ferre, himself a medical doctor, who was very worried because France was fighting with the UN forces in Korea, and a great many young men were coming home with at least one limb lost. So she gave away the feeding device, and he also made her a member of the Académie Française, which is a very prestigious political and scientific elite group over there.
Yeah, is this about the time that she went on a televised interview, or does that come a little later?
She goes on that in March of 53, just a few months after she came back from France. And that was on the Big Idea program, which was an inventing program on the old Dumont Network, WCAU in Philadelphia. She was the first woman and the first African American to ever be on that program.
And I think the famous quote that she made on that show is, I wanted to prove a colored woman could invent something that would help the whole country.
I couldn't have said it better.
And she really did. And these aren't just inventions that helped for a time or were a stopgap. I mean, the Emeses basin is still used today. I imagine some variation of her feeding device is also still used.
It is.
Mm-hmm. It is. Actually, Stephen Hawking used some of the principles of that device for the, what do you call it, Sean?
Oh, his augmentative communication device.
Yes. And that's based in some measure on her device. She didn't get any credit for it, but okay, that's fine.
Well, she wasn't in it for the credit. She actually truly believed in helping people just based off of the work she did.
Indeed. Now, she also did something else, which is sort of interesting too. She had read something that Baudouin wrote in 1897 about medical graphology. Well, what she saw in that was that writing, he saw that writing reveals things about the psychological aspect of a person. She saw it as indicative of the physical health and what kind of bodily injuries a person might have. Really ingenious that she would do that. So she was one of the first Americans to use handwriting analysis, which is something the FBI does today, folks. Police do it today. Psychologists do it today.
She was a true pioneer.
And she became an expert and was consulted by police all over the world, the Mounted Police in Canada, Scotland Yard in the UK, and the Kingdom Police in the Netherlands.
I also understand she received the Order of Canada award for her work with the RCMP?
Yes, that's their highest civilian award, their equivalent of our Medal of Freedom, as well as the New York State Therapy Society Award of Merit in honor of the 100th birthday of her old mentor, Jonathan Witzel, in 1978.
And I understand that her last project was to design a museum on the site of her former grammar school in Virginia. Sadly, she passed away in 2009. Now, I say sadly, but this woman lived a long life of service. But she did pass away just as the effort to get that museum going was beginning, unfortunately.
But 96 is a good age to live, and she was in practice until only about 6 months before she died. So somebody who went out swinging, as the ball players say.
I was going to say she really kind of passed away in the harness there. Honestly, a sad yet fitting end for someone that gave her life and talent and intelligence in the service of others.
Exactly.
And sadly, she is missing from the history books. I had never heard of her. I had heard of her inventions and never knew they were hers. I mean, that's staggering.
Exactly.
It's a crime against history to hide people from the credit they deserve because of their race or their gender or their disability or their sexual orientation or just about anything else.
Right. And that is one of the reasons, folks, that we adhere to what I called the boots on the ground notion of history. That's why. That's one of the reasons why. And yes, it took some digging, and this has been pasted together from this podcast has been pasted together from a variety of sources, which we've tried to give you. But I do hope you've enjoyed this little foray into a very, very important lady. And I hope you will remember her name. I hope you will tell your friends.
And I think it's important to mention here that, while we are doing this for Black History Month, I think it's also really important to mention that history doesn't really know race. I mean, everyone is important in their own way, regardless of the race, gender, creed, orientation, disability. None of that matters. I mean, if you have an impact, you're important.
So, John, you're saying that we all can make history.
Potentially.
Correct. Every day. Don't forget that, people. Your efforts, you can, if you have issues, say you're Black, say you have a disability of some sort, you can give up, you can join the pity party, or you can do what this amazing woman did. You decide. Hope you've enjoyed this.
I want to also thank you all for your support and encourage you to comment, give us a like, and keep in touch. These podcasts are the highlight of my life, and it's been a joy and a pleasure to share it with my two compatriots here and with all of our listeners.
Okay, listen, you all have a good day. Be safe. Remember, history's made every day, all around you. Give us a like. Click on that little reminder bell so you get reminded of stuff. We got some great stuff coming up. So, thank you for listening. Have a good day. Bye.